Hey there, STEM enthusiasts! Welcome back to Kameron's Lab, Dive In, the go-to podcast for STEM students, crafted with passion by one of your own. I'm Kameron, your enthusiastic and ever-curious host. Buckle up for today's insightful episode. Ready to dive in? Hi everyone, welcome back to Kameron's Lab. So today I am very excited to be joined by Miss Anthonia Adenaya Huard, who I met at the DLD 2024 conference. So she is the one that actually introduced me after listening to her talk about the developing Africa's digital infrastructure. So that's why I'm excited to have her here today so we can learn a little bit more about it. Before I let her go on, I'm just going to quickly introduce her so that you know why I'm excited to have her and why you should be excited as well. So Miss Anthonia is a powerhouse, I would say, of information around investment, sustainable development in Africa. She has about 14 plus years of experience in, business development, public affairs, and also multilateral financing, which I will be asking her about later. She has a lot of on-the-ground experience in about 11 African countries. 70 plus companies have grown and thrived underneath of her guidance and support. She's a leader, a mentor, and I'm sure the list can go on and on, but I don't want to take up too much of her time. So, Miss Anthonia, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you, Kameron, for having me. Thank you.
So the first question I wanted to ask is if you could share your insights on the current state of digital infrastructure in Africa and its significance for the continent's future.
Sure, with pleasure. When you think of Africa, Africa has been leapfrogging in technology, and basically we've been seeing massive digitalization growth in Africa, and that is mostly because the average population age 18 to 19 years. Africans, early adopters of technology, of sophisticated usages, who have overlain digital startup ecosystems driven by the lack of public services like education, health, or infrastructure. You have a lot of telcos and banking sector, high consumer of tech, and high generator of data as a result. When you think of Nigeria, for instance, the largest market in Africa, you would have also the second largest media industry in the world in terms of output. Nollywood, putting out over 2,500 movies each year. All this just in one country, right? And you can multiply that by the numbers of countries in Africa, and some very hot spots like Nigeria, as I earlier mentioned, like Kenya, South Africa, Kigali, Rwanda. And with all of this, it's a lot of organic growth that we've experienced. However, there is limitation in the digital infrastructure that is holding back the full potential of the tech industry. Today, the fintech industry in Africa is really well positioned amongst in terms of the investment, global investment. But imagine the potentials or the explosive growth we would experience if only we have the right digital infrastructure. And when we say digital infrastructure, we're referring to fiber to accelerate the adoption of new digital usages for individuals and companies. We're talking about undersea cables, the improved connectivity with worldwide hubs, and data centers to foster access to cloud solution. Today, most of these things are quite expensive for your average African. So imagine some of the limitations on how much they can be online. And that's why we were at DLD promoting the fact that we need to work together with other partners to develop relevant win-win partnerships and ecosystems towards getting closer to our respective SDG commitment. And in this case, we are looking at how do we create more jobs, create more industrialized economy, and most importantly, help with sustainable development for many of the African countries.
I agree. I think having, like you mentioned, that digital infrastructure it's a big barrier. And I think not having it, like you said, is really like a game changer for people. So I wanted to ask, what really inspired you to focus on the digital infrastructure in Africa, and how's your journey been so far?
Again, with my organization, which is called Business Sweden, the Swedish Trade and Invest Council, we're owned 50% of the government and 50% of our companies in Sweden. And our aim is to support Swedish organizations in their internationalization or development in Africa, but also working with local partners or other countries as well to achieve a win-win collaboration. And we focus on about 4 major sectors. It is healthcare, it is transport, it is mining, and it is transport, healthcare, mining, and of course, we also focus on some innovation. For us, innovation is a golden thread all through what we do, because we see tech as an enabler. We need tech in healthcare. We need tech in transport. We need tech in health, in energy, renewable energy. We also need tech in transport or in any sector. Tech is an enabler. And if you want tech to be the right enabler, building the right connection, you need the infrastructure. Hence why we focus partly on tech during our discussion in DLD.
Thank you. And I like what you said, that tech is the enabler, which I so agree with. What would you say would be the biggest challenges and opportunities that you see in developing the digital infrastructure in Africa?
There are a lot of challenges, but we see these as opportunities, right? Opportunities for growth, opportunities for more investment, opportunities for more connections. So, of course, one of the challenges is having the right enabling environment related to the policies, enabling policies to help with investment. The most important is also investment, right? Finances. Many of these countries, to make such huge investments, there is need for sovereign guarantees, and that's where the multilateral development banks comes in. They have support to scale up such investment, to give financing or support with financing that are quite cheap and affordable for many of the countries that are struggling under the debt strain or hurdle. Talking about the sustainability for many of these countries. And that has been quite a challenge amongst the other area. Of course, we need more players in the market as well to come and invest and be present locally and adapt their products to local context. Work with key partners in order to be, more relevant locally.
Thank you. And outside of that, so I mentioned in your bio that you were talking that you're really invested in multilateral financing, which you explained to me wonderfully at the conference. And I was wondering if you could explain it one more time for those that are listening and maybe don't have that extra knowledge.
Sure. When we say bilateral is between 2 countries. And when we say multilateral, it means there are several countries involved. And often the case that's bilateral, it comes with some of the wills and caprices of one country towards the other. So I'm financing this, I'm supporting you with this project, with some of my conditions, right? Which is fine as long as it's a win-win for both parties. But we see multilateral financing. We're talking about the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the IFC, some of the AFC, for example, African Finance Institution Corporation. We have the Afro-Exim Bank. We have the West African Development Banks. These are banks where their funding comes from several countries as sources. So now you have a bag of money, and then you have administrators. And these administrators have then been given rules of engagement towards a goal, a theme. And for each thing, the rule or the rules of the game or the role of the administrators is to ensure that for every investment they make, it meets each of these criteria. And it's actually more seamless and rather efficient way of managing funds. And that way we actually like working with most of these multilateral development banks because they are really relevant in scaling up large infrastructure projects. Rather than dealing with countries. Countries can act as, or bilateral funds can act as catalysts. That we're doing a lot. But when we're talking of scaling up with the sort of long-term investment that is necessary and cheap enough, bilateral organizations are really crucial for African development, including the infrastructure development that we're talking about.
Thank you. I think that you also answered my next question, which would be asking you a little bit more about how multilateral financing plays a part in Africa's digital infrastructure developments. I think you answered that one already, so thank you. But I did want to ask you a bit more. So I'm coming from more of like a tech background. So I wanted to ask more about what kind of emerging technologies or maybe trends that you might see coming out of it as you're building up this infrastructure.
Yeah, fintech is quite huge. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of my introduction, we see explosive growth already in the tech industry in Africa, mostly because this technology is sometimes it's adaptation of what is already existing elsewhere, but needs a local context. Take for instance, we have there's a company that has the smart grid LED metering system. Not that it hasn't existed before, but what have they done? They adapted it to African context in that in many of the African countries, half of the time you're not on the national grid. You have your own generator. You're generating your own electricity. So how do you take this smart grid that is already existing to ensure that it actually gives you, it measures the total electricity consumption, both if when you're connected to the national grid and when you're connected to your own source of energy or power, and giving you how to maximize both in real time. Now, this is adaptation, right? And then, of course, adapting to creating new technologies and leapfrogging. And none of this is because today in Africa, most of these basic technologies or basic infrastructures for in healthcare, in education and all that do not exist. And each person would need to source for themselves and be sufficient. So we see a lot of trends coming from fintech in terms of increasing financial inclusion, mobile money, and what have you. We see a lot of trends coming in from if you're bringing everyone on board in terms of being able to transfer money real time from one application to another, then there comes the challenges of security, right? Cybersecurity, that's also a trend growing. Also, in Africa, although we have a lot of, in many countries, you have rapid urbanization, right? Of more than 5% in many of the major cities. We still have a huge percentage of the population in the rural areas. So how do they access technology? Most of them already have access to technology with their mobile phones, often smartphones. So how do they access the basic infrastructures like healthcare? So we're talking of edutech, we're talking of health tech, so it's a lot of how do we provide the basic amenities or facilities using technology as an enabler, as a facilitator. So there are a lot of trends meeting the needs, and that's how you do, how you adapt or be relevant. And while of course being successful, is looking for the need and trying to meet those needs while also being relevant. Yeah.
Very interesting. I think it kind of also links back to what you mentioned before. It's just like being a win-win situations. Everything seems to be very connected, which is really exciting to learn about.
You can be a social, an NGO, a non-governmental organization, a socialpreneur, or an entrepreneur, and serving the good of the society while making money. It doesn't have to be either or. That's the only way we can be sustainable. There has to be something nice for everyone. It has to be a win-win partnership, both for the investor and for the people benefiting as well.
Thank you. I guess coming from the student side, I wanted to ask what advice you can give to younger professionals who are interested in contributing to this development of Africa's digital infrastructure, might be interested in getting involved.
First, knowledge. You need to seek knowledge. And I'm really happy to see platforms like yours, Kameron, opening the eyes of the student out there on what opportunities there are. Maybe you have opportunities through your thesis to want to also add or contribute to the development, or at least see how you can also be part of that growth. So most importantly, I think it's looking for information, checking where you can be relevant, and perhaps also being part of companies that are already, active on the market. And maybe you might want to be part of an organization like ours in future, connecting the bridges, acting as bridges between Europe and Africa to develop win-win partnerships. And from my perspective, I think the most important is also for students to see how you can do internships in such organizations to get a first-hand insights into how things are, to be able to, of course, decide your perspective or at least opinion about this.
Thank you. I think it all seems to be linking back to just having that knowledge, having that access, and then just being involved. So like you said before, it all seems to be very linked together.
Totally.
It's exciting. I guess my last question was just to ask you a little bit more about your vision for the future. So I know this one is quite broad, but if you could give me a high level of just like your vision for the future of digital infrastructure in Africa and what kind of steps you think we might be able to take, or might be necessary, I should say, to achieve that.
Oh, wow. Vision. I would love an utopian society, but that doesn't exist, right? But it's not, and I think we're already working, together. There are several organizations like ours also working towards ensuring, a relevant development, through win-win partnerships. Now, come the year 2025, we're expecting a growth of at least, like 10%, if provided there are certain infrastructure, just a little more infrastructure are invested. And that would mean cascading the growth that we will see. First, imagine if there is more and more investment in infrastructure, it means more people have access to fast internet, right? More services that needs like 5G connection can be provided, more creation of jobs. So imagine cascaded growth. The economic, social, and environmental impacts, right? And that's what I'm very keen about. One is being more development, but this can only happen through, having the right strategies, adapting to local context, building the right ecosystems of partners, as we are doing in every engagement that we commit to. And these are key to really starting. We have organizations like 21st Century Technologies that is already doing their part. And so there's no use recreating platforms or reinventing the wheels, but first looking at what existing platforms are there. How can you join in that, growth or evolution to act as catalyst, or be part of it, the chain, maybe the missing chain, to get us closer to our respective SDG goals, part of which, of course, is things related to environmental, social, and economic impacts.
Thank you so much. I think I learned a lot today about just not thinking it's a matter of like just do they have access. It's more adapting to what is already there.
Yes.
And outside of that, and then making sure that it's, like you said, a win-win for everybody. So thank you for explaining that and breaking it down. And thank you, Miss so much for your time. Everyone else, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Thank you, Miss Anthonia, so much for your time.
Thank you. All the best.
All the best.
Hi again, awesome listener. That wraps up another deep dive of Kameron's Lab Dive In. Before you dive back into your day, see what I did there? Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Want a behind-the-scenes look? Bonus content? Or just some good old STEM fun? Follow me on my socials, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Kameron's Lab. And remember, every episode is a new adventure, and we've got some thrilling dives lined up for you. Don't miss out. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.